Hey boo, my name is Tracy and welcome to my channel, Criminal Traces. On this channel, I'm going to cover murder, mystery, and mayhem. They say every crime leaves a trace, and lucky for you, I'm right here. In 2009, approximately 39% of missing persons reported in the US were people of color, despite Black people only accounting for about 13% of the population, specifically Black women and children. Many Black families were left grappling with the uncertainty of what has happened to their missing loved ones. Many Black women and children have been missing for decades, and how the missing reports are handled by the justice system and the media raises concern. In this episode, I wanted to highlight a Black queer woman named Mitrice Richardson. If you are from the LA area, you've probably grown up learning about this story. Her disappearance and tragically mysterious death exemplified this troubling neglect. The lack of urgency and care in Mitrice's case is a reminder of the systemic issues surrounding missing persons cases in marginalized communities. Mitrice LaVaughn Richardson hailed from Watts, California, a neighborhood within South Central Los Angeles known for its cultural legacy, artistic landmarks like the Watts Towers, and the civil rights activism movements like the Watts riots. To provide some context to the relationship between the occupants of the area and law enforcement, the Watts riots began in 1965 when a young Black man named Marquette Frye was arrested by a white California Highway Patrol officer on suspicion of drunk driving. Frye allegedly resisted arrest, prompting officers to use physical force to subdue him. Witnesses claimed that officers struck him and his mother may have been pushed or struck as well. The sight of police using force on Frye and his mother enraged bystanders, and it was up from there. Surrounding witnesses began yelling, throwing rocks and bottles at officers, and the arrest eventually incited a riot that lasted 6 days, killing 31 civilians, 1 firefighter, 1 deputy, and 1 security personnel. The Watts riot symbolized a demand for change and greater accountability by law enforcement. While the incident began with a simple traffic stop, it quickly evolved into a nationwide call to address deep-rooted racial and socioeconomic disparities. 20 years later, on April 30th, 1985, Mitrice was born to Letice Sutton and Michael Richardson as they entered their last year of high school. Although a teen mom, Letice was very determined to be successful in life. Mildred, Letice's grandmother, took on the responsibility of helping to raise Mitrice, while Letice completed her high school education. Really, she raised them both. Even after graduation, Mildred continued to watch after Mitrice, while the young parents worked at a fast food restaurant. Michael, her father, eventually fell into selling drugs and unfortunately was caught and sentenced to serve 8 years in prison when Mitrice was only 4 years old. By the time he was released in 1993, Letice had moved on to marry Larry Sutton, the man who helped raise Mitrice in her biological father's absence. Living in Los Angeles in the wake of the 1992 LA riots was rough. Tensions remained high between marginalized communities and law enforcement, with deep wounds left unhealed by years of systemic inequality and mistrust. The scars of the riots were visible across the city, from burned out buildings to shattered neighborhoods struggling to rebuild. This led Letice and Larry to move their family about 20 miles outside of LA to Covina. The neighborhood was much more appropriate for a family to raise their child in. More suburbs, more family, more peace and quiet. This move was made with Mitrice's well-being in mind. They wanted her to have the opportunity to receive a quality education and experience the joys of childhood innocence. They believed this move would lay the foundation for a bright future for her. Early on, while attending Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School in Long Beach, it was clear as day that Mitrice was gifted. She was a very smart and determined child who gave her best in all that she participated in. It was reported that Mitrice was such a scholar, she often got bored at school because it was just too easy for her. At Cabrillo Middle School, Mitrice continued her book-smart legacy and was known for being an intelligent and ambitious student. Mitrice's teachers and classmates described her as a young woman with potential and a positive attitude. She even joined the cheerleading team and continued this activity through high school at Long Beach Polytechnic High. One of the earliest notable shifts in Mitrice's behavior was her sudden disinterest in outside activities. This is an important detail to note. She used to enjoy outdoor play, going for walks with family, gardening with great-grandma Mildred, but suddenly she stopped. She took up more quiet in-home activities like reading, writing, completing puzzles, crosswords, things like that. Around the time of this shift, Mitrice also exhibited some signs of emotional distress which may have been linked to family instability and personal struggles. These changes were not fully understood or formally diagnosed as mental health disorders, but would go untreated and intensify as she got older. After graduating high school, Mitrice went on to study psychology at CSU Fullerton. She took an interest in understanding how the mind works and how it reflects in behavior. According to her mother, she was fascinated with psychology overall, and just like she did with everything else, she gave her degree her all. She was known to be an intelligent and motivated student who kept in mind her mother's words. You can do whatever you want in life, as long as you worked hard and stayed focused. And worked hard she did. To support herself through college, Mitrice worked as a go-go dancer at Debbie's in Long Beach and went by the stage name Hazel. Openly queer, Mitrice was dating a woman named Vanessa at the time. Though the nature and the timeline of their relationship isn't clear, some sources suggest that they were casually dating or that Vanessa was someone Mitrice had strong feelings for during this time. Their dealings lasted around 2 years, coming to an abrupt end shortly before her disappearance. The end of their situationship deeply affected Mitrice. Friends and family noted that Mitrice seemed unusually emotional and disconnected during this time. The breakup with Vanessa, combined with other stressors in Mitrice's life, could have exacerbated her untreated mental health challenges. This triggered another noticeable shift in her. Around this time, Mitrice had also tried to pick up modeling and was once invited to a party at the Playboy Mansion. Her friends at the time noticed that she seemed more stressed than usual, not her outgoing and bubbly self. They chalked this up to Vanessa breaking things off with her. She started posting cryptic messages on Facebook and MySpace that alluded to her being really sad and possibly even depressed. Her texts to her family and friends started to become really odd and sometimes didn't make any sense at all. It had gotten to a point where her mom directly asked her, like, "What's up? What's going on with you?" This was what she texted back. "I'm writing a book because you told me I could be anything I wanted. You told me I was Miss America. You told me I was America's Next Top Model. Now, do you know what I want to be when I grow up? Miss Mother Nature. 'Cause Miss America is fake-ass joke. I'm trying to find my way to Michelle Obama to see if she will talk to Mr. Obama about creating my position within the White House." I mean, and I don't know about you guys, but that would definitely cause concern for me if I saw my friend thinking that she was going to talk to the president about giving her a job. I'm very curious, like, what her mom was thinking at this point. On September 16th, 2009, Mitrice left her job at Santa Fe Springs Freight Company early, but in high spirits. She went off the clock for lunch and just never came back to her shift. She ended up stopping at her Aunt Lauren's home and dropping a bunch of her business cards, which is how her aunt knew she was there, and then leaving a note in her uncle's car that said, "I, Uncle Johnny, Jimmy." And then also on the side was written, "Black woman scorned," with a smiley face. Lauren didn't know what to make of this note, but she knew something was off. Her next known stop was to her grandmother Mildred's house. After spending some time with Mildred there, she told her that the ocean was calling her name and planned to go to a dinner at a restaurant in Malibu. Contrary to her friends and family's suspicions of odd behavior, Mildred said that the interaction was very typical. She was in a good mood, she was making sense, coherent, and she had no reason to prevent her from leaving that evening. Around 5 p.m., Mitrice drove by herself to Malibu to watch the sunset, then made her way to a restaurant named Jeffrey's at about 7 p.m. Jeffrey's was an upscale oceanfront American restaurant known for its elevated vibe and stunning ocean views. They also have valet parking, so when she arrived and the valet told her to wait to be assisted, instead she got out of her car and got into another random car that the valet had left there to be parked. When the valet attendant noticed, he asked her what she was doing. Mitrice responded, "It's subliminal," and explained that she needed to avenge the death of Michael Jackson. The Michael Jackson. This is just added to the long list of odd things that she was saying before the time of her disappearance. She then started digging through the stranger's car and looking through their CDs. In the midst of this, she hands the valet her keys and asks him if Vanessa was here. When he replied that he didn't know who she was talking about, she describes Vanessa and warns him to watch out for her. At this point, the attendant is confused and a bit annoyed, so he asks her to get out of the other customer's car and tipped off the other hostess to keep an eye out for her due to her weird behavior. I believe that in addition to her odd behavior, they clocked that she was dressed very casually, which was not really the vibe of the eater. Like I said earlier, it was more of an upscale restaurant, but Mitrice was rocking a Bob Marley t-shirt with a long sleeve shirt underneath, Vans, a pink alligator belt, and a Rastafarian hat. Mitrice eventually did make her way into the restaurant, and once seated, she ordered a cocktail and a $65 Kobe steak. While waiting for her food, she approached a party nearby that had about 5 to 7 people seated at the table. The party did find her behavior very off-putting, but did continue to entertain her just to be polite. She started telling them things like that she was not of this earth, that her mother was planet Earth, and things like that. Once her food came out, Mitrice did find her way back to her own table and eat by herself, but when she was finished, she found her way back to the party's table and awkwardly socialized some more. She told them that she was planning a trip to Hawaii and that she would let them know when she got there. Mind you, these are complete strangers. They finished their meals, paid the tab, and began exiting the establishment. Mitrice followed suit and was quickly stopped by the restaurant's manager, who pointed out that Mitrice had left her $90 bill unpaid. Mitrice told the manager that her bill was covered by the same guest that she was just trying to walk out with, but the manager confirmed that this was not the case. Mitrice very quickly backed down and said, "I'm busted," and told the manager that she was from Mars, emptied out her pockets to prove she had no money to pay for her meal, and stood there wondering what to do next. Before the authorities were involved, they tried to call her grandmother, who offered to cover the tab with her credit card. However, the restaurant was unable to take the card information over the phone without the card user present to sign the receipt. With no solution in sight, the manager's decision to call the police single-handedly changed the trajectory of Mitrice's life.
Lawsville Sheriff Station, Deputy Shalette, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling from Joffrey's restaurant in Malibu.
Yeah.
We have a guest here who is refusing to pay her bill, and we think she sounds really crazy. She may be on drugs or something. We are wondering if someone could come by and pick her up.
Okay, well, what's the address there?
It's 27400 Pacific Coast Highway.
And is she a white, black, Asian, Hispanic?
She's a young black girl. She's probably in her 20s.
Okay, what's she wearing?
She's wearing a black T-shirt and I think blue jeans.
Is she with anybody else?
No, it's just her.
By 9 p.m., the police had arrived and started investigating the incident. When they asked Mitrice what the issue was, she said that her wallet was actually in her car the whole time, which was obviously confusing because you would think that she would have brought this up before the police were called or before they even called her grandmother. When they got to her car, it was a mess filled with paper, garbage, and other miscellaneous items, too cluttered for them to successfully locate her supposed wallet. But they at least found her license to confirm her identity. During the car search, they also came across a very small amount of weed. With this, they ended up implementing a sobriety test, which Mitrice ironically passed. There was no indication that she was under the influence of anything, so they couldn't even take her in on a public intoxication charge. They ended up asking the manager whether he wanted to press charges, and he opted to do so. With this, Mitrice was arrested and driven to the sheriff's station in Malibu, while her car was impounded to the local tow yard. She ended up being charged with possession of weed and defrauding an innkeeper. Weird though, because the amount of weed that she was caught with was really minuscule and wasn't enough, but we'll get to that later. They also ended up finding her wallet in her car eventually, but we'll get back to that. What wasn't documented though was her odd behavior. There were no notes of how she was acting, what she was saying on the ride to the station, or during booking. No mention of her mental state at all. As Mitrice was being transported, Mildred let Lettice, Mitrice's mother, know what had happened and where she was being detained. Lettice called the station to inquire about her release date and time so that she could be ready to pick her daughter up since she was informed that her car was towed. The staff at the station let her know that the release date was the next day and that they would have Mitrice give her a call upon release. Although this was an issue with her daughter, Lettice was happy that she was at least located and in an assumingly safe place. During her short stay in the jail, Mitrice made 4 unrecorded phone calls. Normally, detainees make phone calls on a recorded payphone, but that phone was not in service that night, so she used the regular station desk phone, so nobody knows who she called. The staff heard her talking on the phone, but they were not sure who she may have been talking to. I personally wonder if she was talking to anyone at all, especially due to her mental state earlier that night. The next morning, Lettice calls the station again to figure out how she could bail her daughter out. But to her surprise, she was told that Mitrice had already been released at 12:15 a.m. with no car, no cell phone, no wallet. For good reason, this infuriated her mother because had she known that she would be released the previous night, she would have just made the drive to pick her up. They explained that she had no previous charges and that the current charges were not big enough to keep her detained. and she was not able to be in the jail overnight. So why did they take her there in the first place? Like I said earlier, the amount of weed that they found in Mitrice's car was very minuscule. It wasn't enough to keep her detained, so I'm not really understanding why they didn't just write her a ticket, write her a citation, so that she could face the restaurant charges in the court of law at another date. The staff told her mother that they supposedly offered for Mitrice to wait in the cell or the lobby and that she declined. Because she was an adult, they could not force her to stay and wait for someone. But my question is, with her erratic behavior and her mother initially informing them that she wanted to come and pick her up the day before, why not just initiate reaching out to her to let her know what was going on? During that same phone call, when she asked about Mitrice's location, she also asked how she was acting, and supposedly she was fine. They gave the impression that there were no mental health concerns at all, and that it was her right to leave as she pleases because, again, she was an adult. After she got off the phone, she asked around to family and nobody had heard from her. Her mother was furious at this point because where was her baby? She called the station back within 15 minutes and asked to file a missing persons report, but was dissuaded because it had been less than 24 hours. I want to take some time to educate my audience in California at least and let you guys know that there is no minimum waiting period. That is actually a myth. You can actually report someone missing as soon as you believe they are missing or in danger. Supposedly, this is to minimize the amount of false alarms and effectively allocate resources, but I suspect that there were other reasons as well. Maybe her behavior, maybe her race. At this point, who knows? Shortly after Mitrice was released, dispatch received a call from a man named Bill Smith, who was actually a retired reporter or journalist. I'm not sure which one. But he lived about 6 miles away and reported a young black woman in his backyard that fit the description of Mitrice. When he asked if she was okay, she said that she was just resting. If you guys recall from her childhood though, Mitrice hated nature and hated walking. It just wasn't her thing. Bill's home was fairly remote, surrounded by canyons, hiking trails with rough and steep terrains, ranches, etc. It wouldn't have been easy to end up in his backyard. He was very confused too as to why and how she would have ended up on his property. A deputy did eventually go out to see if Mitrice was still there or wandering somewhere in the surrounding areas, but to no avail. Lettice eventually did go to the police station to file a missing persons report, where she was informed of the most recent sighting of a woman who was likely her daughter Mitrice. So after filing that report, she traveled to the area of the home of Bill, the man who spotted her around 1 a.m. that same day. As she drove there and observed the area, Lettice's concern grew stronger. Knowing that her daughter was deathly afraid of the dark, she was confused as to how and why she would have walked all this way and not at least asked for help in some way, especially since she was approached by the man whose yard she was in. 8 hours after she was reported missing, but according to the family, this was 48 hours, a search team was finally discharged to investigate her disappearance. By way of search dog, they were able to track her scent to a nearby home in Bill's area, but eventually lost the scent. 4 days later, on September 23rd, the LAPD transferred this case from missing person to the homicide unit. They began the investigation by locating her car and sifting through the contents of it. This is when they found her wallet, with her debit card still inside. When they looked into her bank account, they found that she had a little over $2,000, more than enough to pay her tab at Jeffrey's a week prior. They saw no recent transactions indicating activity within the past week either. They also found her cell phone and journal. These would later help the investigators gauge her headspace in the days leading up to her arrest. Her journal entries, coupled with witness reports of her unusual behavior, indicated that she had some type of mental illness, but again, no diagnosis could be concluded. Since this behavior was observable, it was suspicious that the case notes from her arrest and charges made no note of it. Investigators discovered an email sent on September 20th between the station's lieutenant and captain where he felt that she was acting strange and he felt uneasy about letting her go so late at night. This is the exact same station where Mel Gibson was detained some years before for a DUI and was generously offered a ride to his car. So why wasn't Mitrice offered the same courtesy? The sheriff's station stands by the fact that she was not acting strange and that they actually have no recollection of that email interaction. Okay. Months began passing with no word from Mitrice and no tips to the police. This denial of the obvious led Lettice to make the decision to hire a civil rights attorney. By January of the following year, Mitrice's biological father reports that he may have sighted his daughter doing sex work in Las Vegas. His inkling was that she was trafficked and scared to be caught, because when he spotted her, he very audibly called out her name and even ran after her, but she turned around and ran off into the crowd, and he was unable to catch up. Although this type of work is not in Mitrice's character or a reflection of her upbringing, he was so sure that he had spotted her and was devastated not to be able to get to her and bring her home. A friend of Mitrice also spotted her in Las Vegas and reported the exact same reaction to his call out for her. She appeared nervous and ran away. 6 months after her disappearance, thanks to their attorney, the family was brought in to view the surveillance footage of when she was released. Now, previously, the family was told that there was no surveillance footage and that Mitrice was not acting strangely at all, that the cameras were not recording, they were only there for live monitoring of the station. The magical footage that appeared out of thin air told a different story. The video showed a distressed and agitated Mitrice holding on to the cell bar, swaying from side to side. Her family confirmed as they watched that this was abnormal for her, yet the staff at the station maintained that they did not see anything unusual at all. The video of her release showed Mitrice exiting the station, and shortly after, another deputy exits as well. When this officer was questioned and asked what they could recall from that night, they claimed that they did not recall seeing Mitrice at all. Now, due to the 2 sightings of Mitrice in Las Vegas, investigators did take their search there too. Over 70 people had positively reported seeing her, but after searching, investigators still were unable to locate her and bring her home. On August 9th, 2010, park rangers were walking around Montanito, near Bill's home, in an area that is known as the Dark Canyon. It's extremely difficult to walk through, and it's actually not recommended that people casually hike that area due to the danger. As they came down, they discovered a body and a disconnected skull with afro hair still attached. The remains found would later be confirmed to be those of Mitrice Richardson. Her leg was located about 6 feet up from where her body was found, and there were no signs of animals eating at her remains. Now, what were the odds that Mitrice was laying dead in this canyon for over a year and no animals had even attempted to scavenge? This area was home to coyotes and vultures, yet her remains appeared untouched. Due to the rough area, the coroner was unable to get up there to take official photos of how her body was found. The clothing recovered at the scene were her jeans, a belt, and bra. 2 of her shirts, both socks, and panties were missing and never recovered. The park ranger took cell phone photos as best as they could to aid in investigation. Her remains were helicoptered and taken in for an autopsy. According to the medical examiner, there were no signs of trauma to the body and no signs of a struggle as a result of violence. Her death was then ruled to be undetermined. As for the reason she was partially undressed, they stated that the animals must have taken them, but I'm not sure why scavenging animals would value clothing more than a body. As I'm sure you are as the viewer, her mother Letice was also not satisfied with this finding. She ended up hiring her own forensic anthropologist who found that 5 neck bones were not recovered and her left arm was flexed in a very unnatural position. Some similarly textured hair was also found nearby and never texted or examined in the initial investigation. An earring was also found in her hair that she was not reported to have been wearing the day that she disappeared. Her teeth had a pinkish hue on them, which could suggest strangulation. However, this was unable to be confirmed because of the missing neck bones. The private hire felt strongly that this was a homicide and in no way natural or accidental. Even after all of these new findings, in 2011, when her body was exhumed to be studied again, they still found her cause of death to be undetermined. Both parents separately filed charges against the LAPD, which were both settled and honored. However, the LAPD has still not admitted any fault in the disappearance or death of Mitrice Richardson. In 2016, the family requested that the Sheriff's Department's mishandling of her case should be investigated, but it was eventually found that there was insufficient evidence to back up this claim. There were so many instances in this story where I truly believe Mitrice could have been saved from this fate. Her wallet being in the cop's car, the cops not taking her to jail and just giving her a citation, calling her mother to meet her there at the jail when she was released, putting her on a 72-hour psych hold because she was acting unusual. There are many speculations of what exactly could have happened, and if you have any information on what could have happened to Mitrice Richardson, please call the LAPD tip line at 877-529-3835. Mitrice's mother has also released a book titled Mitrice, A Mother's Journey from Despair to Desire if you would like to gain more knowledge from her perspective. During the time of her disappearance and death, I was beginning high school in Compton, California, and I personally did not hear about this case right away, but I did hear about it some years after. I know that in 2020, they had a 10-year memorial at the police station where she was released from. The reason I thought it was important to present about this case is because all we have is us. Obviously, the system is not on our side, and we have to defend each other. Someone out there knows what happened to her, and it needs to be brought to light. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to give me a like, comment a pink emoji, and subscribe for more criminal traces. All right, y'all, remember, do whatever you want, just don't hurt people. See you on the next episode, and hopefully next time you bring a friend. Bye. See you on the next episode, and hopefully the video showed a distressed and subscribe for more criminal traces. No. This episode, I wanted to touch on her disappearance and her tragically, The Watts riots symbolized, change and greater accountability for law enforcement. No. When they looked into her, oh my gosh. Okay. Show don't stop for no code. Call to address deep-rooted racial and socioeconomic